Thanksgiving in Portland was supposed to feel warm candles on the table, the smell of roasted turkey, my little sister's quiet humming in the kitchen. Instead, my father set down his fork, looked me straight in the eye, and said, "Hannah, you need to leave." For a second, I thought I'd misheard him. I froze, fork halfway to my mouth. My mother's gaze darted away. My brother Ethan stared at his plate, pushing mashed potatoes around as if they might swallow him whole. "This is our thanks for your little support," my dad added, shaking his head. Little support? I'd been living here for months, paying for groceries, covering the internet bill, even putting gas in their car when they were short. But in that moment, I knew this wasn't about groceries or bills. This was about something else, something we'd argued over just days ago. And it was about to get ugly. I stared at Em. "You're not pulling your weight," he said, his voice calm, almost bored. I let out a cess. I wanted to list every bag of groceries I'd bought, every bill I'd covered, every time I'd swiped my card when they were short at the gas station. But what was the point? My mother finally spoke, her voice quiet, almost rehearsed. "Hannah, family supports each other." It stung because that was exactly what I had been doing. Supporting them, carrying them, Eve. I set my fork down and leaned back. "And what exactly have?" My father's eyes narrowed, the conversation ending in his mind. The words landed like a slap. And then it hit me this wasn't about rent, or chores, or the gross. They had asked me to pay for a vacation, not just a weekend getaway, but a full-blown luxury resort in Maui, flights, hotel, the works. At first, I'd laughed, thinking they were kidding. When I realized, my dad's face had gone dark. My mom had given me a look like I'd just spit in her drink. Ever since then, the air in the house had been different. Less talking, more slammed doors. And now, on Thanksgiving, they were cutting me loose. I pushed my chair back, the legs scraping hard against the floor. "Fine, I'll go. But I'm done paying for anything, groceries, bills, gas done." My father smirked. "Go ahead. See how long you last on your own." I glanced at Ethan and my little sister Maddie. Neither looked up. I knew they wouldn't say a word. That night, I packed everything I owned. Which, as it turned out, wasn't much. I hadn't really unpacked when I moved back in. It had always felt temporary, like I was just waiting for the next chapter to start. I found a tiny apartment in Beaverton. The walls were thin, the paint chipped, and the faucet dripped no matter how tight I turned it. But it was mine. For the first time in months, my paycheck stayed in my account. No surprise. "Can you cover this?" Texts. No, being guilt-tripped into paying for takeout. I could buy myself a coffee without thinking about how much the electric bill was going to be. The first few nights, the quiet felt strange. Too quiet. I kept expecting my phone to buzz, my mom checking in, my sister asking if I wanted to hang out. But the screen stayed dark. It hurt, more than I wanted to admit. They had cut me out completely, like I'd never been there. And maybe I should have been angry. Maybe I should have been relieved. But mostly, I felt empty. Still, I told myself this was for the best. I didn't need the constant tension, the passive-aggressive comments, the unspoken expectation that I'd fix every financial hiccup they had. This was a fresh start, my own place, my own life. Or, so I thought. Because exactly 1 month later, my phone rang and the name flashing on the screen was the last one I expected to see. The screen lit up with one word, Mom. I just sat there, staring at it, my fork hovering over a container of leftover Thai takeout. My first thought was, why now? They hadn't called. Not once. No, how's your new place? No. Are you doing okay? Nothing. The last words my father said to me were basically, don't let the door hit you on the way out. I should have let it ring. I should have let it go to voicemail. But something about the timing, a whole month of silence, made my stomach twist. I swiped to answer. Hello? For a second, all I heard was background noise, muffled voices, the clatter of something metallic. Then my mom's voice came through, softer than I remembered. Hannah, we need your help. I almost laughed. What's the matter? Out of Wi-Fi? Grocery store closed early? Silence. Then she said, it's Ethan. My chest tightened. What about him? She hesitated, and I could hear my dad's voice in the background, low and sharp. She covered the phone for a second, then came back on. He lost $25,000. I blinked. He what? He gambled, she said quickly, as if saying it faster would make it less insane. I pressed a hand to my forehead. How does a 20-year-old even get $25,000 to gamble? Another pause. He borrowed it. The room seemed to shrink around me. From who? A bank? Not exactly. My mind jumped to the obvious. You mean loan sharks? She didn't answer, which told me everything I needed to know. And when does he have to pay this back? I asked. End of the week. I exhaled hard. And let me guess you have nothing. We're already maxed out on the credit cards, she said, her voice cracking. We don't even have enough for next month's rent. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. It would have been so easy to say no. Not my problem. Figure it out yourselves. After all, these were the same people who kicked me out like trash on the curb. But Ethan, he was my brother. And as much as he could be an immature pain in the ass, if he owed $25,000 to the wrong people, this wasn't just a learn your lesson situation. This could get dangerous fast. I can cover some of it, I said finally. I heard her let out a breath, like she'd been holding it the entire call. Thank you. Hannah, don't, I cut in. I'm not doing this for you or Dad. I'm doing this so Ethan doesn't end up in a hospital or worse, and he's going to pay me back. Every cent. Of course, she said quickly, almost too quickly. I didn't believe her. But I also didn't care at that moment. I grabbed my coat and keys, the November rain tapping at the windows like impatient fingers. The drive back to my parents' house felt surreal. The streets glistened under the streetlights, and a few houses still had their Christmas decorations up from last year, even though it was barely December. When I pulled into their driveway, my stomach tightened. Part of me wanted to throw the car in reverse and head home, but I stepped out, crossed the wet sidewalk, and before I could even knock, the door opened. My mother stood there, looking tired older somehow. Come in, she said. The house smelled the same cinnamon air freshener and cheap candles, but the air inside was heavier than I remembered. Ethan was slumped on the couch, staring at the floor. My dad stood by the dining table, arms crossed, wearing that same look from Thanksgiving. Nobody said a word. And in that silence, I realized this wasn't just going to be about the money. I stayed standing for a moment, the front door still open behind me, rain mist drifting in. Nobody moved. Finally, I broke the silence. All right, someone tell me what the hell happened. Ethan didn't look up. My mom sat next to him on the couch, her hand on his back like he was 5 years old and had just scraped his knee. My dad was the one who spoke. Your brother was an idiot. That's what happened. Ethan finally mumbled. I didn't mean for it to get this bad. I stepped closer. How do you accidentally lose $25,000? He let out a shaky breath. It started small. A couple hundred on this online poker site. I won big at first, so I kept going. Then I lost. And I thought I could win it back. But, you didn't have $25,000 to lose, I snapped. So where did you get it? Ethan hesitated, glancing at our dad like he was silently asking for permission. My dad sighed. He took out a loan. Something about the way he said it made my stomach twist. What kind of loan? My mom's voice dropped to almost a whisper. Not a bank loan. I stared at her. So, what? Some backroom loan shark? Her silence was answer enough. I pressed my fingers to my temples. Jesus, Ethan. Do you have any idea what these people do if you don't pay them back? I know, he said quietly. I just thought I could fix it before it got this bad. I turned to my dad. And when exactly is he supposed to pay this back? End of the week, he muttered. I let out a humorless laugh. So you have 5 days to come up with 25 grand. And you're already maxed out on credit cards. Perfect. My mom's eyes were pleading. Hannah, please, you're the only one who can help. I walked over to the window, looking out at the rain streaking the glass. In my head, I was running numbers, my savings account, my emergency fund, the little cushion I'd built since moving out. I could cover half, maybe 12,000. And then? Would they just come back for the rest later? Would this become my problem forever? I turned back toward them. I can give you 12,000. That's it. The rest? You'll have to figure out. Ethan looked up for the first time, his face pale, eyes wide. Thank you. Don't thank me, I said flatly. You're going to pay me back, every cent. And if you don't? I let the threat hang in the air. I will, he said quickly. I didn't believe him for a second, but I didn't say that out loud. I was too tired to fight. My mom exhaled in relief. My dad said nothing, and the tension in the room shifted, not gone, but simmering beneath the surface. I pulled out my phone. I'll transfer the money tonight, but after that I'm gone. And as I stepped back out into the Portland rain, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end of it, not by a long shot. That night I sat at my kitchen table, laptop open, staring at my online banking screen. $12,000. It wasn't everything I had, but it was close enough to make my stomach knot. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a long time before I finally hit send. The confirmation email popped up. The money was gone. I told myself it was the right thing to do. Not for my parents, they'd never appreciate it, but for Ethan. Because as stupid as his choices had been, I didn't want to see him get hurt. An hour later, my mom texted, "Got it. Thank you." No emojis, no warmth. Just those 4 words. The next morning, I woke up feeling lighter, not happy, exactly, but relieved that the crisis was handled. Days passed, then weeks, and for the first time in months, my phone stayed silent. No frantic calls, no guilt trips. I went to work, came home, made dinner in my little kitchen. The quiet was strange, but not unwelcome. I'd almost started to believe that maybe, just maybe, helping them had closed some invisible chapter between us. That the worst was behind me. 4 weeks after the transfer, I decided it was time to check in. Not with my parents? God, no, but with Ethan. I wanted to see if he was making any effort to pay me back. I dialed his number. It rang 4 times before he picked up. "Hey," he said, his tone casual, like I'd called to chat about the weather. "Where's my money?" I asked. No small talk. There was a pause. "I don't have it yet." I gritted my teeth. "Ethan, you said you'd start paying me back right away. It's been a month. You could have at least sent me $20 just to show you're trying." "I will," he said quickly. "I just need more time." "More time?" I scoffed. "You had time to dig yourself into a hole. You should be sprinting to climb out of it." He went quiet. I could hear faint noises in the background, video game sound effects. "You're screwing around, aren't you?" I said. "No, I don't care about excuses." I cut him off. "I bailed you out. I didn't have to, but I did. And now you're acting like this is optional?" "It's not like that," he said, defensive now. "Things have just been hard." I let out a bitter laugh. "Things are about to get harder if you keep this up." There was nothing but silence on the other end. "Figure it out," I said, and hung up. For the rest of the week, I kept waiting for a text from him. A tiny repayment, something. Nothing came. By the weekend, I'd made up my mind if Ethan wouldn't pay me back, I was going to find another way to make him, and the rest of them, feel the weight of what they'd done. And as much as I told myself it was just about the money, a part of me wanted them to feel just a fraction of the anger I'd been carrying since Thanksgiving. By Sunday afternoon, I'd had enough. I was making coffee when it hit me I was still paying for their damn Wi-Fi. And the cable. And probably their streaming services too. All because when I moved back in, I'd put the bills in my name. When I left, I figured they'd switch it over. Of course, they hadn't. I opened my laptop, logged into the internet provider's website, and there it was, my name on the account, charges hitting my bank every month. My jaw tightened. A few clicks later, the cancellation confirmation flashed across the screen. Internet. Gone. Cable. Gone. Netflix, Hulu, Disney Plus, all of it terminated. It felt good. Not petty, not childish, just fair. If they couldn't respect me enough to pay me back, they didn't get to use my money to binge sitcoms and stream cooking shows. The next morning, at exactly 9:17 a.m., my phone rang. It was Mom. "Hannah," she said, her tone already sharp. "The internet's down." I feigned confusion. That's weird. Must be a local outage. She huffed. Can you look into it? Maddie has schoolwork, and we can't even watch TV. I smiled to myself. Oh, I already know what happened. A pause. What do you mean? I canceled it, I said plainly. There was silence then. What? I canceled everything. Internet, cable, streaming services gone. Her voice jumped an octave. Why would you do that? Maybe because I was still paying for it. You know, with the money I'm apparently never getting back. But your sister needs it for school, she snapped. Then maybe, I said slowly. You should pay for it yourselves. I could hear my dad in the background. What's going on? Hannah canceled the internet, Mom hissed. Good, Dad said, his voice dripping with disdain. We don't need her. I laughed. Let's see how long you last without Wi-Fi, Dad. There was a shuffle. Then his voice came through the line, sharp and low. Listen, you little. I hung up before he could finish. For the first time in a long while, I felt in control. This wasn't revenge for the sake of revenge, it was about boundaries. About saying, no more, but deep down, I knew my family. I knew they wouldn't just take the loss quietly. They never did. 3 days after I cut them off, I came home from work and immediately knew something was wrong. The hallway light was on. I never left it on. My stomach tightened as I slid my key into the lock, except the door wasn't locked. The knob turned easily. I froze. I always locked my door. Always. I pushed it open slowly. The smell hit me first, dust and something faintly metallic, like old coins. Then I saw it. The living room was a disaster. Couch cushions tossed to the floor, drawers yanked open, clothes spilling out. My coffee table was flipped on its side. And my TV? Gone. My heart pounded as I hurried to my desk. The laptop I used for work gone too. A couple of boxes in the corner had been ripped open, contents scattered. This wasn't a random break-in. They didn't take my jewelry or the little cash I kept in the kitchen drawer. They took my electronics, the things they could pawn quickly. My throat went dry. I already knew who had done it. It wasn't some stranger. It was them. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, my hands shaking. The police officer who showed up was a middle-aged man with tired eyes. He took one look around and started jotting notes. Any suspects? He asked. I think it was my parents, and my brother, I said, without hesitation. His eyebrows lifted. Family? Yes. They kicked me out last month. Things haven't been great since then. I told him about Thanksgiving, about the loan sharks, about the $12,000, about cutting off the internet. When I finished, he just nodded slowly. You want to press charges? The question hung in the air. Part of me hesitated not because I doubted they did it, but because pressing charges would make it real. This wouldn't just be family drama anymore. It would be legal, permanent. But then I thought about my dad smirking at me across the dinner table, my mom's quiet manipulations, Ethan promising to pay me back and then blowing me off. And now, this. I straightened my shoulders. Yes, I do. The next day, I was at work when my phone rang. Mom, I answered. What do you want? What did you do? She demanded, her voice practically shaking with rage. You broke into my apartment and stole my stuff, I said evenly. What did you think was going to happen? It wasn't a big deal. I cut her off. You just what? Taught me a lesson? Took what you thought you were owed? There was a pause, then her voice softened in that way she thought could still guilt me. You didn't have to call the cops, Hannah. I laughed, cold and humorless. Oh, so when I help you, I'm family. But when you rob me, I'm supposed to let it slide? It wasn't robbery. The cops disagree, I snapped. Her voice trembled. We can fix this. Just drop the charges. No, Hannah, I said no. There was a sharp inhale, like she'd been slapped. This is serious. Your brother. I gave him $12,000, I said, my voice rising for the first time. And he still hasn't paid me back. Now he's breaking into my house? I'm done. You're really going to do this to your own family? She whispered. I took a deep breath. No, Mom, you did this to yourself. And I hung up. 2 days later, the police called. They'd found my TV and laptop at a pawn shop in downtown Portland. The seller's name on the receipt? Ethan Miller. It was all they needed. Ethan was arrested for burglary. My parents were charged as accomplices. I didn't go to the hearing. I didn't need to. The evidence was airtight pawn shop records, security footage. Ethan pleaded guilty, probably hoping for leniency. My parents tried to claim they didn't know what he was doing. No one believed them. They all got probation, no jail time. But now they had criminal records. For once, the consequences were theirs to carry, not mine. It was a Tuesday evening when my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. I almost let it go to voicemail after the week I'd had. I wasn't in the mood for spam calls. But something made me swipe to answer. "Hannah?" a deep, raspy voice asked. "Yeah, who's this?" "It's your grandfather." I sat up straighter. My grandparents lived down in Salem. We spoke maybe twice a year, usually around holidays. "Is it true," he said slowly, "that your parents and Ethan stole from you?" I hesitated, glancing out my apartment window at the rain streaking down the glass. "Yes," I said finally. "It's true." There was a long pause. When he spoke again, his voice was colder. "They will regret it." I didn't ask what he meant. I didn't need to. I never found out exactly how it happened. Maybe my grandparents confronted them directly. Maybe they just cut them off without warning, but the fallout was immediate. No more covering the rent when Dad's hours got cut. No more grocery money slipped into Mom's purse. No more bailing Ethan out of trouble. For the first time in decades, my parents were on their own. And then came the final blow. A week after that call, I came home to find an envelope taped to my apartment door. Inside was a cashier's check, $12,000, the exact amount I'd given Ethan. There was a note, written in my grandmother's careful handwriting. "We don't want you to carry that burden. You acted with more integrity than anyone else in this family. This is not for your parents. This is for you." I read it 3 times, the words sinking in like sunlight after a storm. When I called to thank them, my grandmother was the one who answered. "You've done more for them than they ever deserved," she said. "We're proud of you, Hannah." I swallowed hard. It doesn't feel like something to be proud of. It just feels sad. "That's because you still care," she said gently. "And that's not a weakness. But you can care and still protect yourself." Her words stayed with me long after the call ended. A few days later, Ethan texted me, "Sorry about everything." That was it. No explanation, no offer to make things right. Just 6 hollow words that probably took him 10 seconds to type. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Because for the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't tied to their chaos anymore. The money in my account wasn't just repayment, it was proof that someone in the family saw what had really happened. Proof that I wasn't crazy, or overreacting, or too sensitive. And maybe, just maybe, it was the start of finally living without waiting for the next disaster to hit my doorstep. I didn't hear from my parents again after that. Not a call, not a text, not even one of those passive-aggressive Facebook posts my mom liked to write when she wanted to make herself the victim. And honestly, the silence was a gift. For so long, I'd been tangled in their mess, fixing problems I didn't create, emptying my savings to plug the holes they kept poking in their own lives. I thought that was what family was supposed to do, but helping them never meant we were closer. It just meant they took more. I started noticing little things in my daily life. My paycheck stretching farther, grocery shopping without calculating how much extra I'd need to help out somewhere else. Even the air in my apartment felt different, lighter, freer, like the walls had stopped closing in. It was strange, though. There were moments when I'd reach for my phone, almost out of habit, ready to check if they needed anything. Then I'd remember, they weren't my responsibility anymore. That thought didn't make me cold or heartless, it made me whole. One Friday night, I walked through downtown Beaverton, the streets buzzing with the glow of storefronts and the smell of late-night food trucks. I stopped at a coffee cart, ordered something I used to call too expensive, and sat on a bench watching the rain gloss the pavement. I thought about the Hannah who moved back in with her parents months ago. The one who felt like she had to prove her worth by paying for everything. The one who thought family helps family meant sacrificing herself over and over again. That Hannah was gone. Not because I'd stopped caring, but because I'd learned the difference between helping and enabling. If they ever got into trouble again, and I knew they would, it wouldn't be my problem. I wouldn't be the safety net, the emergency fund, the silent rescuer they could count on to bail them out without question. They'd have to live with the choices they made, just like I'd learned to live with mine. And maybe, somewhere down the line, they'd understand what they lost. Not just the money, not just the services, but me. But I wasn't going to wait around for that realization. A week later, I deposited my grandparents' check. It didn't erase what happened, but it closed the loop. That money was no longer hanging over me like some unspoken debt, and neither were they. When I saw my balance afterward, I smiled not because of the number, but because every dollar in that account was mine. No strings, no guilt, no one waiting in the shadows with their hand out. I don't know what's next for them. I don't plan to find out, but I do know what's next for me. A life built on my own terms, with my own rules, where my worth isn't measured by how much I'm willing to sacrifice for people who'd never do the same for me. And if that makes me selfish, good, because I'd rather be selfish and free than generous and broken.